Good morning. My name is Kyle Houchens. I'm a tech and a trainer for McNeil, the Rhino people who bring you Rhino. And we're going to do a getting started for Windows today. And we're going to build a little car part. If you see a lot of my videos, I do lots of car parts because I'm a car nerd. But uh, the thing about this one that's going to be a little different is we're going to be building off of just a really rough little sketch. And the concept behind this is going to be, what do you do if you're new to Rhino and somebody throws a sketch on your desk and it's a lousy sketch in a terrible view and nothing's orthogonal, there's no four views, and you have to kind of figure it out along the way. And so we're going to go ahead and do that just from start to finish. If you haven't seen these videos before, these are unrehearsed. I basically decide what I'm going to do a couple hours or the night before, and then we go from scratch. And the reason I do that is not because I'm lazy. I've been accused of being lazy, but that's not because I'm lazy. It's because I want to simulate what you guys are going to go through when you sit down at your desk and somebody hands you something that you've never modeled before. So I've intentionally put myself in a position where I'm in the same boat that you are. And if I make a mistake or we have a problem or something screws up on the part, I'm going to back up, talk about what happened, and we'll figure out a way to get through it together. And so that's kind of the way that I like to do these. And so far the response has been pretty good. If you like that style, that's great. Please join us for more because there's going to be more like it coming. If you don't like that, then I guess you have to do your own videos. But so let's go ahead and get started. I'm in an inch environment because I'm in America and we still use inches, puzzlingly enough. But the way I start all of these things is basically with a sketch, right? And it's either, most of the time, it's just a sketch to communicate with myself. And we're going to place it in the scene using the picture command. And I'm just going to drop this dinky, awful little sketch off in the corner. And the idea behind this was just to have a communication, a little communication session or a conversation with myself to figure out what it was I was going to build. And so if we look at this thing, it's basically, an old 60s style hot rod shifter, and it's got a little shape in the shifter, and it's got this bent chrome, shift lever. It's got a little plate here. It's got a rubber boot. It's got another chrome plate here with a little indicator, and then it's got this little housing around it. And so when somebody throws something like this on your desk and says, "Hey, can you knock this out by noon today?" and the panic starts to wash over you, and you think, "Oh man, how am I going to do this?" That's kind of what I want to walk you through here. So what I want to talk about is like basically how do we break this thing down? And if we look at the way that this thing is constructed, right, we can break this down into a couple pieces. There's a box, like a little truncated box down here. So we have to kind of figure out how big that thing is. And then there's this rubber accordion boot, and then there's a plate, and then this, and then the shifter up here. And I always start to think about like, okay, well, how would I make that thing? And the box, that's easy. We're just going to use a primitive and some editing and some fillets, right? We can knock that all out, no problem. The accordion boot, there's a couple of ways to do that. We could do kind of some sort of crazy complicated loft. We could do a two-rail sweep around here where we basically establish a top curve and a bottom curve and then the profile and sweep that around there. We might have to do it in sections because of the shape of this thing where it's long and then it spins around the corner and then goes out. We might have to do this, in a couple of pieces and then fill at the edges. I don't know, but we're going to figure it out. And so basically the next piece, obviously this little plate, that's super simple. That's just a primitive object. The shift lever, piece of cake. And then the handle, if we look at this closer, it appears that there's like a little flat end on it with a little chamfer, and then it rolls into this kind of organic shape that has this kind of, you know, these finger cutouts, and then I'm assuming, I can't see the back, but I'm assuming this has the same type of thing going on in the background with a little logo insert or something like that. So there's no dimensions on this thing either, which makes it that much more challenging. So we have to kind of figure out like what is the key elements, and then figure out how to kind of scale them together, so that we get something approximately, you know, in this neighborhood. Now, when somebody hands you a sketch like this, sorry, when somebody hands you a sketch like this, you know, you're kind of on your own to figure out like, okay, well, how much information am I taking from the sketch, and how much information am I going to kind of put together when I build this thing from scratch? And so what I always say is the sketch is a guideline and the model is the rule. And because the sketch is so ill-defined, then the whole idea is we're going to be essentially designing this thing in 3D. So I'm in the top view right now, and I've kind of thrown this off into the top view because I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start with the most complicated part here, which is the shifter handle. I've kind of like, before I started, I actually took a ruler and I just kind of measured my hand and figured that somewhere this thing is going to be about 4 inches long and probably about an inch and 3/4 in diameter, roughly. So to lay that out, let's just start with a center rectangle, and I'm going to bring this out 4 inches. So, oops, no, 2 inches. So this gives me a 4-inch overall, and then we're going to do let's do 2 inches in diameter. So we're going to just do one that way. Oops, nope, not 21. I'm going to go 2 inches that way. We're going to go 1 inch this way, and this gives us kind of, you know, our let's just dimension this to make sure that everything behaved itself. So it's 2 inches that way, so I actually have to double this. So now it's 4 inches, and 4 by 2. So this is kind of roughly the envelope that we're going to be building the shifter handle in. And once we get the shifter handle built, then the rest of the stuff can kind of go from there. So I'm going to take this sketch and I'm just going to tuck it kind of over here so it's out of the way. And we're going to start laying this thing out. And so basically what I'm going to do is, if we go to perspective view, and there's a great new feature in version 6 called One View. I'm going to turn that on. And what One View does is it allows us to, as we roll around, actually change the construction plane. I don't know if you can see this going on, but as I see this, if you look up in the right-hand corner here, you'll see that it's changing directions on me. And this is great for laying stuff out because the construction plane determines where stuff gets drawn, right? So if it's on the top view, it's going to get drawn here. If it's on the right view, it's going to get drawn over here. If it's on the left view, it's going to get drawn over here, all this kind of stuff. So what we can do is, because the construction plane is referenced and we're drawing 3D curves, it becomes super helpful in order to be able to lay this stuff out. So I'm going to roll over here, and we're going to see that the left construction plane is enabled. And I'm going to start with an ellipse, and I'm going to snap this at the center, or at the midpoint of this thing. And I want this to start there. And then we're going to come over here and draw like this. And what you can see is, because One View is enabled, it allows us to be able to draw in that construction plane. And then because One View is enabled again in the top view, now I can start laying this stuff out and say, okay, well, how does this go from here? Now, if we go back and look at our sketch, we can see that it's got like a little cap on it, and then there's a chamfer, and then the rest of the stuff starts. So I'm actually going to consider this to be outside of that 4-inch envelope. And so I'm going to copy and paste this. And because I've got gumball going on, I can actually move this in 3D space without worrying too much about the construction plane. The construction plane really only comes to view when you're drawing, really only comes into play when you're drawing stuff. And I'm going to hold down the Shift key, and I'm going to scale this in. And I'm going to kind of look at that and say, well, it looks a little too far. So let's poke that in there like that. And then I'm going to go ahead and just do a little modeling here to start with. Maybe not. Maybe I'll wait. Let's do some modeling. So let's start with a planar surface. Just going to start blocking this in. That's going to go there. And if I go to shaded view, you can see what's happening. And then let's loft between this curve and this curve. And that's going to give us our chamfer. And see how it's like spinning on us? I don't want that, so I'm not going to simplify it. I don't like how that's spinning like that. So let's do something different. Let's do a 2-rail sweep, and we'll be able to control that a lot better. There we go. I like that better. And then if I take this stuff and I join it, which I do all the time when I'm modeling, I want to make sure that stuff is joined, and then I'm going to mirror it to the other side. And this gives me my envelope to work in. Now, the curves on the front, if I go back to my top view, actually I don't even need to go to the top view because I've got my one view activated. I can start drawing and say, if I shift drag the first point so I know it's going to be tangent with that, and then I'm going to draw this in here. And I think I want, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. I want 4 dents. So I'm going to go 2, hold down shift, snap to here, shift. And I'm gonna edit this curve. I'm not super concerned about what the thing looks like at this point because I'm gonna edit it. 1, 2, 3, and this will be the 4th one. And then I'm gonna just drag it over there. Now, that's a really scabby curve. It gives me the basis of what I want to do, but let's clean this thing up a little bit. So let's take, I'm going to turn the points on. And I'm using hotkeys. I shouldn't do that for a beginner's tutorial, but the turn points on is over here. So let's grab all of these points, and I'm going to just scale them to 0. And that's going to force them to all be in the same line, right? And then this one, I might move this one down too. I'm going to use OSnap to bring that down. So that gives me kind of roughly the correct shape that I'm looking for. And so now I can just use Gumball and just tune this up a little bit and say, okay, do I want this to have this really kind of square feel at the bottom of these things, or do I want this to be a little softer? If I want it to be softer, I'm going to bring these closer together, and I may even grab these center points here and pull them down a little bit, and that'll give me a little different feel to this. You can see if I pull these down, it's going to soften the bottom of that. See how that softens a little bit. If I line them up, it's going to be a little sharper. And I'm just going to do a little looking to see, like, okay, now I could, make one and then transfer it over, but this thing was like made in the 60s originally, and they kind of just went at it with an angle grinder. This is probably a little deep, so let's bring it up a little bit. That feels a little better. And then I may actually want to grab each one of these. I don't like how this is squared off so hard. So I'm just going to pull these down just a little bit. You can see that that softens the front of that thing a little bit. I think if I'm backing away from this, I think that's probably going to look all right. And then let's draw the back side of this. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to shift drag so that my first point is always tangent. I'm going to pull in a little bit. I'm going to come back out a little bit. Just has this kind of like bulge in the back of it. And I'm going to come down here and then shift drag to the last point. Let's take a look at this curve. I don't really like how that curve looks, so let's do some editing. Let's pull this over here. By the way, these sessions are supposed to be interactive, so if you have any questions along the way, feel free to hit the chat and ask. I'm more than willing to stop and answer questions or go back and explain things or anything like that. We like to do these pretty informal. McNeil's a pretty informal company to start with, so we try to roll that way with our videos as well. All right, so let's just keep picking at this. So we're just going to adjust the curves, you know, get the feel of the shape to be the way that we want. I might actually bulge this just beyond our envelope a little bit because I like how that feels. And when we get to kind of the basic shape we want, I'm going to hide the envelope for now. Then we've got an opportunity basically to do a couple of 2-rail sweeps, right? We could probably sweep this all the way around. Let's give that a shot and see. So if we pick this as a rail, and let's do, I'm going to hide the curves except for these so that we use the same edges. So we're going to chain these edges. 1, 2, 3, 4. The reason I did that, excuse me, I'm going to mute for a second. I got to sneeze. Sorry. The reason I did that is because I had a curve on this side and I didn't have a curve on this side, so I had mismatched edges. So I wanted to make sure that I have the same, you know, same both sides. All right, so that's my second rail. I'm going to roll this, and then I want this to be a closed sweep. And we can see that there's a lot of isoparams in here, and we could probably just roll it like that. I mean, it's probably fine. And if we set this tangent and tangent, you can see that it bulges that out, but I don't like how that looks, so let's leave it sharp. We have some options up here. I can rebuild this with fewer cross sections, fewer control points, but you see we lose all our detail. I can refit this, which organizes the isoparams a little bit better. See how that's a little nicer? It's still not like great, so I may just leave it because that gives us at least the isoparams are balanced through here. And let's just see what it looks like. If we go to rendered view, I'm actually pretty okay with that. I think that looks pretty cool. We might, you know, if we're getting really fussy about this and we wanted the top of this, see how the top undulates like that, and we wanted a consistent cross section through there, I might actually take this curve and copy it, drag Alt-Tab, and then rotate this thing -90, and then move it here. And then I might do the same thing on the bottom, actually. I might just mirror this. Go to the front view. I might just mirror this down to the bottom. Make sure that that's touching. Looks like it is. And then I've got a little bit more control over this. So let's try it again and see if we get a different result. We should. I'm going to auto chain this so I don't have to pick them all. And then say 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we do a closed sweep. And that gives us a little bit more control here. We shade this. See how I've lost that undulation on the top and I can control this. And then my grip stuff starts in the front here. That I'm feeling a little bit better about. Now, you can also see that see how these are splaying out like this? I might not want that. I might want this to be more in a straight line. And if that's the case, then I may have to actually go back and try and do this in a couple of pieces where I actually 2-rail sweep just this section. See how I get straight sections now? And then I 2-rail sweep. I'm going to use the surface edge. These sections. And I'm going to set this to be tangent because I want that to be tangent. I can always do this with a match later so that it averages, and I might do that. I might actually just let it roll like that. And then back here, I think I can get all of these in one piece. So I'm gonna do all three of these in one piece. And this will just give us a little bit different result, right? If we look at this now, see how the shape is different? And I think that's a little bit more of what I want. So let's do some cleanup. I'm going to use the match surf command, and I'm going to match this surface edge to this surface edge, and I'm going to average them tangent. And it's asking me to refine the match. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave it. And you can see how it's moving a little bit, right? And if we average them, if we don't average them, you can see the one moves. If we do average it, you can see both move. And that gives us a little better result there. Now, I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to average those. And I'm going to do the same thing down here. Now, you can see that this broke. See how that happened? It broke back there when it retrimmed. So let's do the multiple matches. So the untrimmed edge is this one, and then let's match it to here, to this surface edge, and let's roll it. See how it's breaking into a poly surface here? I don't like that. So let's do something different. Let's go ahead and just build our tangencies in to start with. So let's go from this surface edge to here, here to here. And we'll roll that through like that. And we'll just set the tangency at the top to start with. Okay. Like that. Do the same thing down here. Surface edge, here and here. And then we're going to set tangencies on both sides. And that gives us a little bit better shape that we had before. So I'm going to join all this up. It should join into a closed poly surface, which it did. And then let's just clean up the edges a little bit. I'm going to just throw a couple of little blends on here. And I like if you go over the fillet tool, the right click on it is a blend tool. And I like blend because it works off a continuity instead of a rolling ball. Rolling ball fillets always look a little SolidWorksy to me, and that's not an insult. I just don't like how they look. Whereas blends actually work on continuity. So let's go ahead and do this. It's a really, really subtle thing, and if you're not used to looking at it, it might not even show up to you, show up to your eye, but to me they look pretty brutal. So I'm using the set all command, and I'm going to bring this down. I'm going to bring this actually really small. Something like that. Let's preview it and see what it looks like. I think that'll work. So I'm going to right click to accept. Right click to run the command again. I'm going to blend these edges here. These edges here. Now usually if you see many of my other videos, I typically don't put fillets on this early. I typically get to the very end of the model before I start filleting. But in this case, because this is kind of a self-contained part, and once it's done, it's done. I think it'll be all right. So so let's go ahead and roll that. I think that looks too big, so I'm going to make this smaller. Something like that. And then if we shade this, it gets a little definition on the edges, but it's not, going to stab your hand or anything. So let's call that done. I'm going to save this because faith may save your soul, but only Control S will save your data. All right, so I'm going to just call it shifter. All right, so that's the first piece of the puzzle here. And if I was being super organized, I would put this on a layer, right, double click the name, give it a, change the layer of the name, right click, change object layer, and then that puts it up here. All right. So with that in mind, right? So now what I need to do is I need to decide like, okay, how am I going to build from the shifter down and then build the box off of that? Or am I going to use the shifter to determine the size of the box and build off of that? It kind of looks like the rubber boot is about the same width as this. So that's probably a good place to start laying out, and then we can kind of go backwards to try and figure out from there. So if we go to the top view, and one cool thing about one view, by the way, is you don't even have to like switch back and forth to your views. If I start rolling around and I hold down Shift Control, it snaps to an ortho top view. So I can actually start laying this thing out and say, okay, well, let's say that the shifter boot is about as wide as the shifter handle, maybe just a little bit more. And then we're going to say it's about, maybe it's about this long, right? That feels about right. And then I'm going to just copy paste, Control C, Control V, Shift drag to get the dimension for the plate. And it looks like it's a little narrower on the sides and a little taller on the top and bottom. So I'm just going to one-dimensional scale that. I need a little bit of room on the side for the indicator, so I'm going to make this just a little wider. I may make this just a little narrower. And then there's a little relief, Control CV. On the side, this is where the plate lays down into the console. I could use offset, but I like to just kind of design my curves by eye. Copy paste. And then this is going to be kind of the truncation or the overall width of the box, right? So then we kind of look at this and say, okay, does this kind of feel like this? And it feels like it's getting wide to me. So let's bring this in like that. And I'm going to scale the entire thing in a little bit like this. So that's starting to feel a little bit, this may be as tall. Maybe it's a little narrower overall. Maybe the boot's just a little bit narrower. So that's starting to feel a little bit more proportional to kind of what we've got going on here. And I'm going to slide this entire thing over a little bit. It's a little counterintuitive, but I'm going to slide this over just a little bit because I want just a little bit more room on the side of this thing for the indicator. And I'm going to just drag this over, tap Alt drag, and I'm going to make my indicator slot like this, Shift drag, and we'll tuck this in, something like that. Now, if we wanted to be cool, we could like come in here and kind of, integrate that and all that, but back in the day, it was all boxes and straight lines. So, all right, and then we've got some little screws in the corners, but we'll deal with those later. And I think this is still feeling wide to me, so I'm going to just pull this in a little bit. This thing actually was really pretty narrow. Maybe the shift boot's a little narrower than I'm giving it credit for. This is where you look at, you go back to your training as a designer as opposed to using the sketch as an absolute rule and say, does this thing look right in 3D? Does it feel right? Does it does this do what I want it to do? Does this have the same feeling of what I'm looking? And it actually it's still looking like tall to me. So I'm going to pull this down a little bit. This really is a pretty compact little unit. All right, so now to get out of this ortho view, I'm stuck in ortho view, Shift Control, right click and hold, and I can roll right back out of ortho view. And then I can start putting these things where they need to be, right? So if I take the shifter and I'm going to lose all my history. In fact, I'm going to kill my history by, I have a hotkey set up for this, but the key for killing history, if you type history, go to purge all. That way, if I move this without moving the objects, I don't get it doesn't yell at me. So I'm going to stick this up in place like there. And then let's say, let's grab, I'm going to take these curves. I'm going to make a curve layer. Change those and hide it. And then that way, if I need them, they're there. If I don't, they're gone. Let's grab all of this and let's start laying out where this stuff is in space. So I'm kind of seeing like this to this is the base of this unit, and then the plate and the shift lever kind of comes from there. Maybe this goes a little higher. It's kind of tall. And probably the shifter needs to go up a little bit too. It's kind of feeling more, you know, the aesthetic for these things is kind of I don't want to say crude because there's an elegance in its simplicity, but it's kind of simplistic. So let's start building out the base. That seems to be the easiest place to go next. So I'm going to do this with a loft and see if I can just pull this off with a loft. And that looks like that's going to be fine. And I'm going to cap this top and bottom, which makes that into a solid. And this thing does have rounded edges on it. So I have to make a decision. Do I want to build with fillets to start with, which typically complicates things, or do I want to build with sharp edges and then put my fillets on at the end? Typically, the best way to do this is sharp edges and fillet at the end. So I think I'm going to go that way, and if it becomes a problem, I can always go back, and you know, this part is simple enough. It's not like it's a huge deal to go backwards. So this is a poly surface right now, and I want to show you kind of a cool trick. If I use the split face command, it's going to say, what face do you want to split? Well, I want to split this one. And what do I want to do to split it with? I'm going to use curves to split it with. I'm going to split it using these three curves. And what this is going to do is this is going to break my poly surface up. If I hide the curves, this is going to break my poly surface up into individual pieces. If I shift control click, you can see I can pick each one of these individual pieces. Now the cool thing about this is because these are all planar objects, I can actually model with this. So if I want to make this little indicator, shift control click, drag this little extruder, and boom, I get an extruded piece. Shift control click, that's a sub-object selection for a poly surface. Start dragging down. That gives me my opening for this. Now, this indicator is actually, it's got a base, right? So it's got a pocket. It has a plate with numbers in here. It has a little indicator thing on it that moves with the shifter, and then it's got a glass or a plastic top on it. So I'm going to take this and poke it down a little bit farther, shift control click, and then drag. I'm going to make this a little deeper. And this one came down too. I'm going to move that back up. And then I need to actually use this thing to model some pieces. And I don't like this being dead straight. If I roll around here to the top view, shift control click, and snap it to the top view. I'm going to hide this for now. I don't like this because it's lined up. I want it to be a little bit truncated. So shift control click, I'm going to scale it just a little bit in this direction. And I'm going to scale it just a little bit in this direction. And then that way when you look at it, right, it's not dead orthogonal, right? Because that's not interesting from a viewing point of view. Shift control, right click to roll back out of that snapped in top view. And then we're going to use the pieces here. We're not going to use any modeling tools, but we're going to do lots of modeling. Shift control click, I'm going to drag, and then I'm going to, before I let go, I'm going to tap Alt. And I'm going to actually break a surface off. Now I'm going to take this and using O-snaps, I'm going to snap it back to where I found it. And then I'm going to extrude it just a little bit. And that's actually going to make an entirely separate piece in here that is got just a little bit, if I roll around here to the top, see how it's just got a little reveal in there. Let me make sure I've got that in the right position. Yeah, so see this tiny little reveal here? I actually like that. And so let's roll back around to the top view. Shift Control click the top surface, shift drag on the handle. And then if we roll back over here, you can see I actually truncated that a little bit and just accentuated that, which is kind of what I wanted. So this piece, if I run the isolate command, I can hide everything except what I'm working on. And then let's do what I fondly refer to as the pernurndle. I'm old enough. There was I don't know if anybody in the audience is as old as I am, but I grew up in the 70s, and there was a show called Green Acres that Zsa Zsa Gabor was a part of, and there was a scene in there where they were trying to teach her how to drive, and she came up with the adorable acronym pernurndle, which was the shifting pattern on the thing. She was very confused as they were trying to tell her how to drive, and she wanted to know what she was supposed to do with the pernurndle. So from that day on, it's been the pernurndle. So that's what we're doing. Everybody's like, cool story, bro. All right, so the thickness on this is 10 units right now. We're in inches. We don't want 10-inch thick parts. So I'm going to do these at like a 1/4 inch. I don't necessarily want it to be grouped output because I want to be able to move these things around. And then I may actually just do a little darker font. I could do, now we'll do Arial black, that's fine. All right, so I'm gonna just roll that, and it'll make my letters. Now these are obviously too big, so I'm gonna scale these down. See, now you guys see it, pernurndle. Every time you get in your car from now on, you're gonna see it. And I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna just use an O-snap to center it. And I'm gonna scale it down just a little bit. Actually, I think that actually works. So let's do this. I'm gonna snap it to the mid, and then I'm gonna just move it down. I may want these lined up, justified left, but let's see. Everybody's gone. All right, now let's space these out a little bit. So I'm going to bring this down here and bring this to here. This one I'm going to snap to the midpoint, and then if you have a start and an end point, you can kind of eyeball the middle, right? So I'm going to just move this. Maybe use nudge. And then I have to decide, like, how do I want these lined up? If I just draw a line down here, do I like the fact that they're a little left justified? I think I'm going to buy off on that just because of the kerning widths on the letters. My graphic designer, I guess ex-graphic designer, now Dr. Wife, would look at this and probably shake her head, but I'm going to line up the P and the L because they're about the same size, and then these are about the same size. So I'm going to leave that like that. All right, so let's roll around. Shift Control right to get out of that view, and then Shift Control right to snap into this view. And I'm just going to take these and I'm just poke them into this. And I'm going to leave it, again, Shift Control right to roll out of that. I'm going to leave these as separate pieces because I want the option to be able to do this with a separate material later. Now, in V6, it's cool because you can actually do sub-object material assignments. So I could actually Boolean these together and then do 2 material assignments on the same poly surface, but it's kind of simpler if you just leave it. Scale this a little bit. Any questions so far, by the way? You guys are either bored to tears or I'm doing a better job than usual explaining everything. Let's show everything again. And let's take a look at what we've got. So we've got this. Now I want the little glass cap that's going to be in here. So I'm going to pick this curve. I'm just going to use the extruder. And then let's just build the little indicator. I'm going to do that by just drawing it. We're going to assume this thing's in park while it's sitting still. So I'm going to just draw this. And we'll do it just with a straight line. I could have probably just done this with a box, but in fact, let's do that. Let's do it with a box. In fact, let's cheat. Let's just take something that we've already designed. There's this, copy paste. Why do extra work if we don't have to? It's not laziness, it's efficiency. Something like that. Have you guys used OneView before? If you haven't, give it a shot. I think you might like it. Shift Control drag to get the bottom of this, and I'm just scaling it so that it matches. And then I'm going to take this entire thing and just scale it in just a tiny bit so it's got just a little bit of a reveal in there. And this I'm going to just leave poke through. I'm not going to go through and like make the slot for it and all that kind of stuff. So let's take a look at what we've got. So we've got this now, and I've got this poly surface here. So let's start just for fun. Let's start throwing a few materials on this just to see what we've got. So if we go over here and let's make a new one, let's do a metal one, and let's assign this to here, here, here. This is a poly surface, so we're doing sub-object assignments here. And the bummer about this is if I edit this, it's going to I'll lose this, but I just want to show you this for right now because it's kind of cool. Shift Control click on all these pieces, right click up here, assign, and you can see that we can assign a material to a piece of an object. So let's get a black one out here, plastic, and let's do black plastic. And let's do less polished. Let's even put a tiny little, speckle pattern on it. And we want it to be just a little teeny tiny one. So Shift Control click, click, click. Get all these pieces. And again, when I start adding my fillets and stuff like that, all this is going to go away, which is a drag, but so be it. There's that. Let's grab this piece here. Let's put a plastic on it, but it's going to be a very transparent plastic. And let's do it kind of an old-timey car, greenish gray, kind of had that. Let's assign that to there. And you can just barely see it because it's pretty transparent if we back this off a little bit. Very transparent. Interesting. Looks like my transparency is misbehaving. Let's see what's up with that. Ah, that's why. I just extruded the edges. I didn't cap the top of it. So let's do that. Let's cap it. Hey, that looks better. Make it plastic again. Now we get our transparency. There we go. That's looking a little better. Let's put this back where we found it. This Same thing. See, it doesn't have a cap on it, so let's cap it. Make a new one. And make this orange. Let's make it orange. Aren't you glad I got to do it again? And then let's do the letters. Let's do the bottom of this thing. Black. And let's do the letters chrome. So we're kind of like, you know, kind of pre-visualizing, maybe just having a little conversation with ourselves to try and figure out what it is we're looking at. So this kind of gives us a little basis. Now, the second I throw a fillet or anything on this, all my material assignments are going to go away, which is a bummer. But we have all the materials. We can always just throw them back on later. It's not a big deal. So we've got the, oh, let's make another material for the shifter handle. Let's do a metal. And this is cool because I can actually just assign this here. Now it's super chromy, but I don't want it super chromy, so I'm just going to make it rougher. And you can see that it gets more aluminum-y. See that? I can adjust its level of aluminum-ness. Is that a word? I don't know. I don't think that's a word. But all right, let's make the shift handle. I'm just going to draw this very simply using straight lines. Planar surface. I'm going to grab this and drag it over just a little bit, and then I'm just going to extrude it. Might make that a little fatter. Really beefy. If I hold down shift, I can extrude in both directions. There we go. All right, let's just fillet this entire thing all at once. I'm gonna isolate, go up here and grab a fillet. We're really, you know, we're cruising along here. We're only 47 minutes into this, and we're actually, and 15 of that was me blabbering at the beginning. You know, we're actually really getting close to having this thing ready to roll. Set all, 0.15. That still looks too big. 0.05. Let's preview it and see what it looks like. Might be too much. Might be just right. We don't know. I think that'll work. So let's go back and put, I'm going to throw chrome on this. Bring back. So that's the basis of our shifter. And I'm going to slide this entire thing over a little bit because we're just a little, want this to be a little bit more centered, even though it's a little asymmetrical in the opening. All right, so shift boot. We've got a curve here, right? This one, and then we need to determine a curve up here. So I'm gonna just throw a square up here in space. I'm gonna hide all these curves for the time being. And so I need to determine, basically, I think the way that I'm gonna roll on this is I think I'm gonna do this with a 2-rail sweep. So that means I have to have a base curve. I have to have a, you know, my 2-rail curves are gonna be these, like, you know, I guess for lack of a better term, circular elements at the top and the bottom, even though they're squares. I know everybody's saying, well, it's not square. Let's do this rounded. I'm gonna just snap a square from here to here, and then I'm gonna throw the rounds in it because I do need those to go around the corner, I think. So let's try it and see what we get. And then I'm gonna copy this. Go to the front view, I'm gonna copy this. Drag, tap Alt, shift drag on the scale handle to get it scaled. And that's way too high. Needs to be way down here. something like that. See how kind of nice one view is, where you don't have to worry about your views anymore. You can just kind of do it. That's a little too small because that plate goes in the top of that. Remember, if we're looking at this sketch, it's got this little plate in the top, so the boot goes underneath that. So let's say that the plate is here. In fact, we can even rough that in. See if we like that relationship. Kind of looks like it's about a finger's width below the crook. So I'm going to call that probably good. So let's take this curve and let's isolate. Isolate, by the way, is a new command in 6. And let's draw our baffle. And I'm going to just start by simply just going midpoint to midpoint, so I've got a reference. And I think what I'm going to do is essentially this. This is going to be my 2-rail sweep here. I think we're just going to do that, but we're going to use a different curve. Now, the problem is when we build this accordion in here, right? This in out, as it goes around the corner, this may self-intersect in the corners. If it does that, then we'll have to go back and build it in pieces, but let's see what we can do if we just roll like this. And it looks like I missed. No, I didn't. I'm fine. So I'm going to start with something that looks like this. I want these to be rounded. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to array it along a curve. This is the path curve. How many of these do I want? Let's do, I don't know, let's do 6 and just see. And that is not enough. Or the piece is too big or something. The baffle is not big enough. So let's make the baffle bigger. So I want this to be really kind of waffly. And let's bring it in kind of like this. And then let's do this again. So let's transform array. I'm going to do this a linear array because that's a little bit easier. Let's do 8. And then let's start here. And then the nice thing about linear arrays, you can kind of determine like how you want this thing to lay in. So I think I'm going to go something like this. And if that's not the right shape, you know, like if this round, this is a little like 1980s Tron, you know, for my taste. So maybe this baffle needs to be a different shape. And if that's the case, let's do it now instead of trying to figure out how to fix it later. So let's draw a little bit cooler shaped baffle. And I'm going to start kind of at the midpoint here. I'm going to pull this down something like that. And then let's do something like that. And let's trim this. And then I'm going to just throw a little fillet on here. That feels a little better as a baffle shape to me. So let's join this all up. Let's do an array, linear. Start from here and let's just kind of play this out. Feel like that probably is workable. Now, I need to determine how like all of this fits together. So what I'm going to do, what I want to end up with is a curve that goes, you know, like that, right? So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim all of these guys like that. And then I might use blend curve to stick these together, because that's going to give me kind of a nice organic feel. See that? That feels a little better than just having a straight line hacked through there. Always, you know, evaluate your stuff from a design point of view. Don't just like build something like a CAD monkey. We don't want to do, you know, you can teach a chicken how to do this stuff if you really get picky about it. And we don't want that. We want, you know, we want this stuff to be designed, right? We want it to like look like it was designed. We want it to be as good or better than what you could do if it was done by hand. And so that's kind of the goal. Pull this in like that. And then I'm going to trim this one. It trims it out like that. All right, so this is kind of our curve, right? Not this one. This one is. Join it. Now, if we're living right, we can use this thing and just do like a crazy 2-rail sweep. Now see how this is like all janked out like that? Let's fix it. I'm gonna set this thing. I'm just gonna scale it to 0 to flatten it out, and then I'm gonna slide it back to the center. Because it had snapped when I did that blend. It was like, freaking out. So let's add this. Let's do a blend from here to a point, and I want to just have this be the midpoint. And let's join this up. And let's see what we get out of a 2-rail sweep. Get a 2-rail sweep out of here. Let's see if it rolls around and does anything decent. And it actually looks like we're going to get a really decent result out of that. We don't change the cross sections. It's actually really pretty good. Yeah, I'm going to call that good. And it's a poly surface. So if we wanted to do something with it, like bend it or something like that, we could. You know, we could always come in here and bend it if we wanted to get some different effects out of it, right? Like that. I don't think we need to do that just yet, but let's see how it fits with the rest of our stuff. That looks kind of nice and rubbery, huh? Let's scale it in just a little tiny bit. Looks a little wide. That doesn't fit anymore, so I'm just going to run a cap on a planar surface on the top of this. Actually, I can just cap this object. And that gives me my plate for free. So there'll be a little reveal in here, right? It's not just like there's something, this kind of rolls up, tucks in, and goes under. So let's cheat and make that. So I'm going to Shift Control click. I'm going to drag this up and tap Alt, break a piece off. And then I'm going to bring this down. And I'm going to scale it in a little bit like this. Now you could offset and all that, but there's time for that. And let's just do a little Boolean. Let's pull this out. And then I can get, I like to build in like, you know, these little visual production gaps just by, I'll do a Boolean and then I'll just make it just a tiny bit smaller. And then that way you get that little, you know, sloppy production gap reveal thing. That's a thing. I'm going to just knock the edge of this thing off because it's got that overly polished 60s chrome, highly precise American automotive feel to it. There's our plate. Now this has a gap in it around here, so let's take and remove, we're going to subtract from this using this, And then if I isolate and then throw a fillet on the end of this, we'll get that kind of little gap feel already. Like that. We're cruising, right? So let's take this, let's make this black. I'm gonna make a new black because I want that to have a slightly different shade of black than the other part. And let's make its reflectivity, let's make it frosted, but with a fairly high reflectivity, and that should give us a kind of a rubbery feel. See that? Kind of like it's just been armoralled or something. Now, I like, see how it's kind of, this is kind of a weird little detail how it came through there. I don't hate that. If I did hate that, you could obviously go back and build this thing in pieces and build a blend surface between these. But I kind of like it. It kind of feels, it was a little happy accident. It kind of feels like a little weird production thing. And of course, I've got the shifter facing the wrong, the crook of the shifter going the wrong direction. So let's spin that. There we go. Put that back there. Let's take this and put this here. Might even want to rotate that a little bit for more speed power shifting. And if this thing really was in park, we may want to even do something like, if we're being accurate-y, we may want to rotate this thing forward like this. And then we have to decide, like, do we just remake the boot, or do we bend it to match, or, you know, like, how do we deal with that? My temptation would be to bend the boot. So let's see if we can do it. Let's see if we can make it work. And I want to make sure I'm bending this in the right direction. Yes. So let's see if we can pull this off. I'm going to start the bend here because I don't want to move the base of it. But let's see if we can bend it. And it looks like the bend worked, but like it didn't pull over kind of how I wanted it to pull over. So I could go and at this point cage edit it. And I may actually, let me unbend it, and I'm going to just do this whole thing with cage edit because I think that's going to give me a little bit more control. Because now what I can do is I can slide this over like that, and then I can grab these points and I can rotate them. And then I can slide this whole thing kind of where I need it to be, like that. I may have a little fixing to do, but, and it looks like it kind of broke my part, which is odd. That is the right, kind of the right configuration, but it looks like it broke my part. So let's see what happens. Let's try just simply exploding it and joining it again. So something is funky here. Let's try and figure out what it is. But see that's cool, right? We got that little shift boot action going on there. So let's figure out if it's a cell bad. There's nothing bad. So let's start picking at it and say, okay, if I join this to this and this, that works. This to this, that works. This to this to this. We'll find out where it breaks. So all of that stuff seems to be working. So it's got to be one of the caps on the top and the bottom, right? So let's try this to this. That's working. So let's figure out what else we're looking at here. We don't even really need the cap on the bottom, so I don't really care about that unless you're doing it, unless you're printing. And this, I don't even really need that one. I'm gonna call that good. Now, if we needed to print this, then I'd have to go in and figure out like the cap is the top and the bottom or whatever. But this, let's just call this like this is a sketch model and we're gonna look at renderings. So the last thing that we need to do, I mean, basically we're home free, right? All we need to do is just add our fillets and stuff to this. So let's clean this up a little bit. Now we're gonna lose our material definition. I'm actually gonna pull this out. And when I do that, you know, I see I lose all my material definition. But I don't really care too much about that because I'm gonna deal with it along the way. So let's go ahead and put some fillets on here. I'm gonna do these corners. And I am going to bump this up a little bigger, like that. And then I'm actually going to change these to an even bigger one, do a variable on that. Just pick this handle down here, enter a different number and hit enter. I like that. So I'm going to remember this number, 0.25. So that gives that. I want to knock this edge off, so I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to fill it around the edge of this thing. And because I was 0.25 in the corners here, I can't be 0.25 here. Plus, that'd be too big anyway. So let's, if we run that, see how it fails? I'm going to do this, 0.1. Can't do identical size fillets stacked on top of each other. All right, so let's do the inside of this. And I don't really have an inside of this, so let's make an inside. So I'm gonna Shift Control click, and then I'm gonna just extrude a little inside. Select surface, join. And then now I've got something that I can fillet. So let's go back and throw a fillet on that. And 0.15 is probably going to be okay. We'll see how it relates to the outside of that. I'm okay with that. So 0.1 seems to work. So let's roll that. And let's bring this back. This doesn't have any thickness on it, so let's add some thickness to it so that we can fillet it. And let's throw, I think we used 0.1 on these before. So I think we're good. So let's throw our materials back on, and then the only thing that we really need to do left is just throw our materials back on here, and then put the screws in the corners. Let's save it. Now I have a trick for screws, and if you've seen any of my webinars in the past, by the way, this is an awesome Facebook page called How Cars Start. It's a bunch of guys I went to school with are in here. McMaster car. McMaster Carr is the greatest thing for 3D modeling resources. Let's find, let's see, we need flathead tapping, we need socket head, round head, need just regular screws, tapping wood and drywall, flathead screws, round head screws. Let's do these, and then there is, actually I want them countersunk. Let's find the right ones. Type rounded head, hex, flat head. There we go. Actually, I want them a rounded. There we go. I want an oval head type. This is what I'm looking for. Metric Phillips oval head screws. So I can do this, and then I can say this is going to be like an M, I don't know, let's say like an M6, and I want it to be, let's say 20 millimeters long. And if I click on the part number and I go to product detail, roll to the bottom, I can save this as a step file. I can throw this on my desktop. It comes in as a step file here. Hide this, drag this into my model, import, and boom, there's the screw. And not only is it like dimensionally accurate, but they're watertight. If I check for naked edges on these things, they're good. So you can print these. So my favorite thing to do with these is to basically use these as modeling elements, and I can take these and tuck them in the corners here. That's probably too big, so I'm going to just cheat and scale it. But let's say I got the right size. I'm not going to bore you with going back and picking the right one. But let's say I got the right size, and I take this and I tuck it here in the corner, and I mirror, and I mirror, and I get this and this and the top plate, and I do this, and I Boolean these out. Check this out. You get perfect chamfers for these things to lay in. Now, if I had gone one step further and was actually designing this to be something that was going to be printed or something like that, I can take this and Boolean it out of a block, and I think you can see where this is going. Check it out. Perfect threads. Now, the cool thing about this is if you print this thing and run a tap through these will clean up beautifully. And if you were to actually buy those screws from McMaster Carr using the part number that you clicked on to get the information, by the time the print came out of the printer, they'd be sitting on your front door. You could screw these in with your fingers. They work perfectly. So that's, I used to model threads. In fact, there was a plugin called Bolt Gem and a few things like that that were out there for making this stuff. I don't even think about modeling threads or any of that nonsense anymore. I just go and grab that stuff from McMaster and use it, and it works phenomenally. All right, let's just throw material on these, and let's take a look at what we've got. All right, so I think, what are we, an hour and 14 minutes, and 14 minutes of that, 15 minutes of that was spent with me blabbing at the beginning. So in about an hour, we've got something that we can actually work with. We could, most of this stuff we could print. Let's see what's not printable. We'd have to close up these parts here, but we could do that mostly with the cap command, and we get ready to roll. So let's take a look and see, because we've already got materials assigned to it, let's just throw it into ray trace mode. Actually, let's save it first. The other thing also, just, this is like a nerdy thing that I do. If you take and just like, the chances of these things all being perfectly aligned when you put a model together are very slim. So I actually go through and just rotate the screws a little bit so they don't match each other, so that it looks like it was like hand assembled. So just that little tiny, like, you know, maybe if you were a careful builder you would do that, but like I like just the little humanity of, like, that one doesn't quite match that one. It's a detail that like not many people would notice, but for some reason it just makes your eye feel a little like, oh, this is like a thing instead of a model, right? All right, so let's throw this in ray trace mode and take a look and see what we get. And pretty quickly you can see we get to a point where we could have a presentation rendering or something like that we're ready to go. And it looks like our transparent glass is just a little not transparent enough, so let's transparent it some more. And we may want to lighten the color on this a little bit. As we drag through there, we start to get a little bit more of the stuff underneath. A little color goes a long way in transparent stuff. So let that res up. We're at about 70 samples right now. The metal, you know, it's getting a lot of white in it, so we might want to, for the one that's not as polished, I might want to just actually drop the color of it just a little bit. And what that does is that adds a little bit more depth to it. It doesn't get quite so washed out. You don't want to go crazy and like bring it down here, because then it starts to actually look like it's colored. Now, if you want anodized, you can do this, you know, and make it actually look anodized, but we don't want that. We want just a little more depth and a little less blowout on that. And this piece actually I think is supposed to be chrome, so I'm going to throw that one on here. There we go, and that's really chrome. That way we've got our chrome, we've got our aluminum, you know, this one's supposed to be chrome too. So we've got our chrome, we've got our aluminum, we've got our rubber, we've got our plastic, we've got our glass, or our transparent plastic, we've got our details, we've got our little indicator, and we knocked all this off in about an hour. All right, anything in there that you haven't seen before that you had questions about, or anything in there that that didn't make sense, or you want to call BS on, or whatever, go ahead and hit the chat and we'll work it out. So at about 3, I'm on a pretty fast video card. I have a Quadros 5-6000 in this card, in this machine, so it's got a lot of CUDA cores and it renders pretty quickly. So we're at about 480 samples right now, and as this goes through, it'll go to 1,000 samples before it stops, but it's ripping through there pretty quick. You can see the counter down here in the corner. All right, so unless you want to sit around and watch the counter go, that's about all I have for you today, unless you have any questions, comments, criticisms, complaints, anything like that. You're more than welcome to lodge them at this point. If not, I'll go ahead and call it. We will, this video will be posted on our Vimeo page, by the way. If you don't know where our Vimeo page is, it is here. And if we go to Rhino tutorials, this one. This is our Vimeo page. There's 517 videos on here. This is where all this stuff gets posted. This was the knobs and switches one we did just last month. feel free. This is the key fob. Watch the Windows one, not the, or watch the Mac one, not the Windows one. The Mac one went better than the Windows one. And lots of other stuff in here. All right, so if you haven't been using this, make sure that you go and dig through here. There's tons and tons and tons of stuff in here that you can use. This getting started, this tactical flashlight, all this stuff. Pens and all the getting started stuff is laying in here. All right. If you want to look at the channel, yeah. So you can dig through all of this stuff. There's different channels of how this stuff is laid out. So if you want to just see the getting started stuff, you can click on here, and this is all the getting started stuff that we've done in the past. All right. So I will throw this. Throw this page in the chat so that you've got it. And my stuff is here. If you're interested. And then that's about it. So let's see what we're doing with the rendering. I think we're in pretty good shape. Yeah, so it's done. So we've got a nice little presentation rendering. All our parts are assembled and ready to roll. If we spend another 15 or 20 minutes to cap the top and the bottom off, we'd have stuff that we could actually print and hold in our hands. So, all right, any other questions? If not, I will let you roll. Thank you for joining me. It's always nice to do this to an audience instead of talking to myself. But we will be doing the same thing on the Mac. If you're interested, Friday. If you want to see the differences between the Mac and the PC, it should be very minimal, but there are just a little few differences at this point. They're getting less and less every day, and will be eliminated by the time we get to V6. Feature parity in V6 for Mac. I think that's about it. All right, any other questions? If not, I'll let you go. Fantastic. This was Getting Started, Rhino for Windows. I'm Kyle Houchens. We'll see you next time.